Hey, this is John with Master Gunworks. I was asked by a few of my customers if I would do a few more videos. This particular video is going to be actually a merging of a series of video segments, so you don't have to sit through a 2-hour video. One thing I would like to make clear at the beginning of this video, it's not intended to be a how-to step-by-step video. It's just going to show some of the more critical aspects of the trigger job as we do it. I did receive permission from the owner, our customer Scott, to go ahead and film this work on his pistol. This is a stock Springfield Prodigy, and he's not very satisfied with the stock trigger, and you can probably see why in a minute. Now the trigger is hard, and you can definitely feel some creep. Yeah, it's breaking at right about 5.5 pounds, has a little bit of creep in it, and yeah, isn't very nice. So we're going to get it apart and kind of show you some of the process and what we do. Okay, this is something that we do on almost every pistol we work on, with the exception of maybe if I'm just replacing sights or something like that. I don't usually do this, but we actually go through a checklist that we have before and after the function of the pistol, and then it shows all the inspection portions of the frame, slide, recoil assembly, all these different things. Our customer Scott, he was particularly concerned with some wear patterns that he was seeing on the slide versus the frame. And that's something we take a look at anyway. We take some measurements, look at what the slide frame fit, stuff like that is. The slide to frame fit on this particular firearm isn't terrible. I mean, there's definitely some play there, but it's not anything that I would consider excessive. We measured it with a gauge block here, 102 gauge block. We had 99 on the frame, so we've got about 3 thousandths worth of vertical clearance, and then from side to side we've got maybe 7 to 8. Again, I mean, it's nothing I'd freak out about. I mean, it's manufactured gun. These are kind of the things that you expect on those. If it was a $5,000 or $10,000 hand-built custom 1911, well, then you could freak out. But for a manufactured gun, that's to be expected. Nothing that should, adversely affect the accuracy of this pistol. Couple things that I did notice. Definitely, you can see the difference. I don't know if you can see it on here. Kind of how the finish is worn off here more than it is on this part of the slide, and you can kind of see it on the portion of the, well, a little bit on the frame. Nothing crazy. I mean, again, nothing to freak out about. But you often wonder, okay, if there's proper clearance, which there is, and everything else being equal, why would it wear on one side more than the other? In this particular case, I think there's a couple clues. Again, nothing that's going to adversely affect the firearm, but just for out of curiosity, I look things over. You look on the hammer, you can see how the wear pattern on the hammer is significantly more on the left than it is on the right. Theoretically, I would say with the wear on this particular pistol, while we're seeing it more on the right than the left. I think what's essentially happening is there's uneven pressure from the hammer onto the bottom of the slide, and that's essentially cocking the slide this way. So it's pivoting very slightly to the side, and that's why we're seeing, you know, a little more wear here and a little more wear here on the slide. Again, probably not freak out worthy. It's kind of to be expected. Another thing I did notice is you're probably not going to be able to see it, so you're going to have to probably just trust me. There's some little marks on the slide here right on the edge. When I was taking a look at it, it looks like this side actually has they broke the edge. They put just a real slight 45 on it, where this side doesn't have as much. So I'll probably just take a stone and break that edge just to even it out. Take those couple little tiny burrs out, just because you don't have a perfect 90-degree surface riding against a perfect 90-degree surface on the frame, and therefore you might get a little bit of a little burr or something. Again, not a big deal, nothing abnormal. Everything looks fairly normal as far as the frame to slide wear. Again, but we do go through the rest, the barrel fit, the slide to barrel fit, lockup. That's actually really good. I mean, there's just a very, very slight amount there, but it's something we do with every pistol we work on. We take a look at everything we can, make sure everything is functioning properly and that all the systems are, you know, meshing together properly the way they're supposed to. Okay, here we are back with our Prodigy fully disassembled. As I mentioned in the previous portion of the video, the owner of this Prodigy was a little bit concerned about some uneven wear he was seeing on the slide, and we were kind of showing some of that. I actually did a separate video where I went into a full diagnosis of what was causing that in this case. If you're interested in looking at that, I think I titled it Problematic Prodigy. So if you look under my other YouTube videos, you'll see that in there. I go through the full diagnosis of what's going on with that one. But for right now, we're going to continue with the trigger job, and I'm going to show you what we have going on. So we have the Prodigy completely disassembled. This is a pretty good photo of what's going on. Essentially, what happens when the trigger is pulled on a 1911 or 1911 style pistol, that includes 2011s and so on. The trigger is here. This is actually a trigger like this. And what we're looking at here in this photo is the bowl, just greatly enlarged. So when you pull that trigger bar moves rearward. It pushes on the disconnector. The disconnector then pushes on the bottom of the sear. The sear pivots, disengaging the hammer hooks, allowing the hammer to fall forward. Now in a trigger job, normally what we do is we will polish or stone, depending on what the surface is, every bearing surface. That means the sides of the trigger bow, the rear of the trigger bow. Actually, in this case, the rear of this trigger bow is not polished, but you can see where it's been, oops, I'm kind of losing my perspective in the camera. You can kind of see where it's been rubbing the finish off. That's actually where the disconnector's been rubbing, and that's on purpose. It should be rubbing, but we want that to be a smooth surface, so we're going to polish up all those surfaces. So essentially you want a smooth transference of power without any weird friction. So we're going to polish the sides of the hammer, the sides of the sear, probably the top diameter where it goes of the disconnector, where it goes through the frame, the rear of the trigger bow, and every other bearing surface. Even the pins, we're going to put a light polish on so that the bore of the sear and the hammer pivots smoothly on both of those. But probably one of the most critical areas on any trigger job is this area right here, between your sear nose and what they refer to as normally as your hammer hooks. Here's a little bigger, a little better picture of an enlarged view of the sear nose engaging the hammer hooks. In this case, the geometry of the sear nose determines quite a bit. On this one, you can see we have what's called a positive sear nose angle. It's actually tipped. I don't know how well you can see it in the photo, but it's not parallel. It's actually angled this way. That's going to give you a very hard trigger pull with a lot of creep. It's going to be very safe. You're not going to accidentally knock the sear off from the hammer hooks, but it's going to be a pretty unpleasant trigger. This one is a neutral sear nose angle, meets up parallel to the hammer hooks. That's essentially what we're going to be shooting for as far as our primary angle on our sear nose. However, we're going to be, I'll show you down here, we're going to be cutting a relief angle on the front of the sear nose. This particular case here, it's a negative sear nose angle, and you can see how, if you drop it's pretty unsafe. There'd be a lot of creep. It'd be very dangerous. If you drop this gun, there's a very high likelihood that it would go off without pulling the trigger. But if we look here at the bottom one here, we have our neutral sear nose angle mating up perfectly with our 90-degree hammer hook, along with our relief angle on the front. That's going to give us the best trigger with the least amount of creep. That's what we're going to be shooting for. I'm going to give you a lot better view of this particular hammer and sear under a microscope in the next portion of the video. But the areas that we're going to be stoning are here and the 90-degree angle on the hammer hooks. And we're just going to true up. We usually true up all those surfaces or just take a light polish with a couple different stones just to make sure that everything is exactly where it should be. Even if it looks pretty good, we'll still take just a real light polish with a couple stones. Okay, here's a view through our microscope lens. This is the actual hammer, the hammer hooks, and the mating surface of the sear nose and how it looks. You can see in this case, the sear nose angle actually looks pretty good. It's pretty neutral, but we are missing the relief angle on the front of the sear. So you can see how far that sear essentially has to travel to disengage the hammer hooks. And that's what's given us that creep feeling when we pull the trigger. Okay, we're back to this photo again, and I just wanted to show you, now that we know kind of what's going on with our particular sear and hammer, I just want to kind of identify the places that we're going to be kind of polishing, but we're going to restone them to make sure that those surfaces are true. So the mating surface of the sear nose, we're going to make sure that angle's correct, and we're going to lightly stone that surface. That's going to clean that surface up. Probably in this case, I'm going to use two different stones, kind of a fine and an extra fine, and that's going to polish up that surface as well as true it up. And then we're going to actually stone in a light relief angle on the front of the sear, and that's going to eliminate a lot of that creep we have, as well as the hammer hooks. The hammer hooks we're also going to stone, and we're going to make sure that that's a true 90 degree on that hammer. One question I've been asked by some people is, in this particular case, this is a Springfield. These are MIM parts, metal injection molded parts. One question I've been asked is, if you stone these parts, are they going to last? And the answer to that is yes. These metal injection molded parts, generally speaking, for these components, they're hard, and they're hard all the way through. They're not a case hardened part, or they used to make use a sintering process back years ago. And in those cases, you would have a hardness depth of maybe 5, 8, or 10 thousandths deep. And once you stone that away, well, the rest of the part would be soft, so you'd be into soft material. It's not the case with the modern fire control components on these 1911s. They're hard all the way through. You don't have to worry about running into anything like that. So in the next portion, we're going to get into polishing and trimming up these surfaces. Okay, hopefully you can see this okay. We've got our hammer in our stoning fixture, and it's essentially the hammer's upside down with the hammer hooks pointing toward the top. This portion of the hammer is parallel to this surface, so the hammer hooks are actually, well, you can see this, but they're right here, and that's essentially what we're stoning. So we're going to start with it's a fine stone. Just going to put a little bit of stoning oil on it. Makes it a little smoother. And then this little portion of the fixture holds everything parallel, but I'm going to try and do this so you can see. We're just going to take very light cuts with light pressure. And you can see we're truing up the surface. It's removing a little bit of the finish, and we really want to get in there and sharpen that inside 90-degree corner and polish that surface up. So just going to polish it here for a little bit. Nothing crazy, just a couple more strokes there. Clean that off a little. And then I'm going to come in. I want to make sure I get most of that, any debris from that stone out of there before I move to a finer stone. Otherwise, I'm essentially doing the same grit over again. This white stone is like a extra fine. Well, it looks like it's truing up nicely. I don't know how well you can see that. I wish I could zoom in a little more, but I really can't. But we're going to take a look at it again under the microscope and get a little better view of what's going on. I'm just going to continue a few more strokes with the ultrafine stone, and we'll be almost done with this portion.